You have a to-do list a mile long, and now you're supposed to make room for God too? It feels impossible, right? I thought so too, but I found that not only was it possible, it was the solution to my burnout. So if you've been drowning in your to-dos, you've tried every productivity strategy out there and nothing is working, then stick with me, because by the end of this video, you will see how some simple truths from the Bible can completely change your approach to time management. And as a result, it can revolutionize your business. But before we dive into this, if this kind of faith-centered content is helpful for you, then take a second and like this video, subscribe to the channel, because that's going to let YouTube know that you want to see more of this type of content. I co-manage a Christian women's Facebook group local here to the Treasure Valley, and there are a lot of business women in there too. So I posed a question in the group recently just to find out what they struggle with most when it comes to balancing their life and their business. And overwhelmingly, their responses pointed to similar themes. So it seems pretty clear to me that everyone has way too much to do. But as Christians, we have the added tasks of spending time with God daily and observing the Sabbath. And for a really long time, I saw both of these tasks as obligations. And honestly, they stressed me out. Both of these topics are super important. They matter so much, and they're definitely connected. But I kind of think they each deserve their own space because they come with their own challenges, and there are different approaches that have worked for me for both. So this month, we're going to focus on the Sabbath, and then next month, we'll focus on bringing God into your daily routine. Now, personally, I struggled with the Sabbath way more than bringing God into my daily routine because it felt like a wasted day. I mean, I work full-time from home, but still, I work a 40-hour week for someone else in addition to building my business and being a wife and a dog mom and all the things that come with just being a human, right? Could I really afford not to do anything for my business on one of 2 days that I was off from my job? But honestly, there was another layer to it even, because beyond just not being able to tick things off my to-do list, I worried that if I didn't make myself available for my existing clients every single day, or even worse, if a prospective client reached out to me on my Sabbath and didn't hear back from me, I was just going to lose out on that customer, right? I worried about all of that. Is any of that sounding familiar? Is that resonating with you? Now, obviously, there's a mindset aspect to all of this. If I look back at this in hindsight, I can see where scarcity mindset was absolutely the root of those worries, those fears, all of that. But you are not here for just a bunch of mindset talk. I know that because you're like me, and while mindset is important, we all know that, we need practical steps. We need, give me the things to do to fix this problem or to get better at this thing in my business. So while we will obviously be talking about mindset related things here, we are going to be talking about practical steps that you can take that will actually end up changing how you feel. Because ultimately, that's what worked for me. So I'm not going to waste your time just focusing solely on your thoughts. But there was this video that I ran across when I first started planning this episode. And I'm going to be honest, it kind of stopped me in my tracks. So I found this Christian homemaker who was talking about the difference between productivity and fruitfulness, or being a Martha versus being a Mary. And this quick clip really got me wondering, is productivity even godly? So we're going to check it out together real quick, and then we'll talk about it.
Before we get into the practical, because you know I like practical, we need to talk about the root issue that quietly erodes our peace as we seek to take care of the home. And that leads us to talking about productivity versus fruitfulness, what the Bible actually calls us to. Before I understand this, I lived like Martha. If you know, you know. When my to-do list felt like a mountain, my instinct was to push harder and move faster. But all that produced in me was a snappy, frantic version of me trying to muscle through the day in my own strength. It was not serving anyone. I was looking at my role through the wrong lens. I thought the goal was to be productive, but I was way off. My husband said something that completely reframed this for me. It was so wise. He said, and it's so true, the Bible does not call us to productivity. It calls us to fruitfulness. Martha looked productive. She was getting things done, preparing a home full of guests, including Jesus himself. But Jesus looked at Mary, sitting quietly at his feet, and said that she had chosen the better thing. Not because the work didn't matter, the work still had to be done, but because Mary was abiding in Christ first. And all our work has to come from that place. Productivity in the world's sense starts with self-sufficiency. I just need to try harder. Fruitfulness starts with dependence on the Lord.
Isn't it nice when our husbands say such random wise things like that that just send us spinning? I mean, this obviously had a complete 180 on her approach to things. And while I feel like in some ways I was already on this path in the way that I manage my time and the way I look at productivity, this clarified it in such a helpful way. But I'm curious what you think. Does this align already with what you've been thinking? Or did this just kind of make you, like it did for me, just pause and reflect? And then it also made me wonder, like, well, okay, well, what exactly does God say about productivity? What does the Bible say about productivity? Does it actually look more like fruitfulness, like she said? So I did some research. I was looking into the Bible to see, like, okay, well, what are some verses about productivity? What can we use to really kind of demonstrate whether or not productivity is godly, if it's ungodly, if it goes hand in hand with fruitfulness? Like, what does God actually say about this? So our key verse for this month is in Proverbs again, ironically, but not ironically, because Proverbs is so jam-packed full of wisdom. We're going to look at Proverbs 6, verses 6 through 8. And as always, we're going to be in the NLT. So what that says is, take a lesson from the ants, you lazy bones. I love that. Learn from their ways and become wise. Though they have no prince or governor or ruler to make them work, they labor hard all summer, gathering food for the winter. Now, at first glance, this sort of seems to support the productivity angle, right? Clearly, the ants are working hard. They've got their to-do list, their assembly line, however you want to look at it. They are working hard. It almost looks like they're working nonstop. But then when you pause and reflect and you look a little bit deeper, I realized something. Yes, they labor hard for a season in preparation for their season of rest. And now I'm not suggesting that we all adopt a schedule where we have months and months of hard work and then months of rest. That's not practical for the way our lives work. But we can certainly apply this approach in the way that our week is scheduled. So much of the, quote, productivity culture that I see in my industry is so toxic because it's focused on completing the most things, but not as focused on the result of all that busyness. I mean, how many of the things that we complete actually need to be done at all? Are we so focused on checking off our list that we miss the point? What fruit are we actually producing? So in addition to seeing that our little ant friends are literally preparing for rest, we also see the fruits of their labor, right? We see that they are gathering food. That's the hard work they're doing, gathering food so that they are provided for during their season of rest. So there's an actual purpose to every piece of labor. Every task they're completing has a very clear and necessary purpose to provide for them when they are at rest. So what exactly is this telling us? Okay, well, here's what I think. I think this shows us exactly how we're supposed to make room for Sabbath in our business. There are 3 things that stand out to me here that we're going to touch on during this video and that we will continue to touch on throughout the month in our quick focus episodes. The first one being that we need to prioritize the tasks that produce the most fruit. The second being to prepare for your season of rest. And the third is to ensure that everyone is provided for while you are resting. Okay, so let's dive a little deeper into that first point, which was to prioritize the tasks that produce the most fruit. Let's revisit Martha and Mary to get a better understanding of what type of fruit God wants us to produce. You can find this story in Luke 10, verses 38 to 42. And here's what it says. As Jesus and the disciples continued on their way to Jerusalem, they came to a certain village where a woman named Martha welcomed him into her home. Her sister Mary sat at the Lord's feet, listening to what he taught. But Martha was distracted by the big dinner she was preparing. She came to Jesus and said, "Lord, doesn't it seem unfair to you that my sister just sits here while I do all the work? Tell her to come and help me." But the Lord said to her, "My dear Martha, you are worried and upset over all these details. There is only one thing worth being concerned about. Mary has discovered it, and it will not be taken away from her." So it's clear, right, in this story that God isn't saying that the work that Martha is doing is bad, okay? So if you're feeling like you relate a little bit more to Martha in this story, first off, you're in good company. But he's not saying that it's bad, the work that she's doing. He's simply saying that Mary's choice to focus on what matters, which in this case was spending time with him, is the better choice. That's all he's saying. Now, we can see how, I mean, it feels obvious when Jesus is literally sitting in their home, listening to his teaching, sitting at his feet would be the better use of time than hustling around making dinner and trying to take care of everybody. I'm not saying it's an easy choice, but it seems obvious when we look at it from our perspective. But I think what we miss, or what I missed in the past, is the fruit that Martha and Mary are actually producing with their choices in themselves, right? Martha is doing all the things that she should, there's that word again, based on social expectations. She's taking care of her guests. She's trying to feed people and, and taking care of Jesus as well. So it's not like she's not focused on him, just focused on caring for his needs versus allowing him to care for hers. But what's the fruit that's producing in her? She's stressed out, she's resentful, and she's overwhelmed, right? Mary, on the other hand, she's breaking all of the conventional rules. She's just sitting there, right? It looks like she's being lazy. She's not doing any of the things that she, quote, should be doing. Yet, what is the fruit that is producing in her, spending her time listening to God and letting him feed into her? She's filled with peace, she's filled with joy, and she's filled with clarity. So my Bible that I love has these little study guides and insights from women all over the world. Some are biblical scholars, some are, just women who have had some sort of insight on a particular story or a different person in the Bible. And there's this one that is related to this passage in particular, and it's fantastic. I'm not going to read the whole thing because it's a little bit long, but the final statements that she made are, I think, so incredibly powerful that I had to share them with you. So this is written kind of from Mary's perspective. So it's almost like you're reading Mary's journal, if that makes sense. And at the very, very end of this journal entry, if you want to look at it that way, she says, "At that moment, being with him mattered more than what my sister expected of me or what people thought I should be doing. When Martha asked Jesus if he cared that I wasn't helping, his answer set me free. My dear Martha, there's only one thing worth being concerned about. Mary has discovered it, and it will not be taken away from her." There I sat, accomplishing nothing, proving nothing, earning nothing. Yet Jesus said that what I was doing was enough. Validation was found in his presence, not in my accomplishments, and it could not be taken away from me. Wow. Just let that sink in for a minute. That last line, I'm going to repeat it one more time because it's what hits me the hardest. Validation was found in his presence, not in my accomplishments, and it could not be taken away from me. That is so freeing when you really take that to heart and let that be true. I mean, we are so inundated with the importance of what we do and what we accomplish and what we achieve. And again, not necessarily that those things are bad, but ultimately they are not what matters. We are already validated. We are already enough because of what he did. But here's where we get to the practical side, right? How do we know which tasks produce the right kind of fruit? We'll tackle that in next week's Quick Focus episode. I'm going to share a simple strategy to help you figure out which tasks to prioritize, to help you choose the better tasks that are going to produce the right fruit. If you remember, number 2 was preparing for a season of rest. When God created the world, he modeled for us this rhythm of work and rest, and he did it for our own good. It is a command, but it's not just a command. He showed us that, and he created that as a way to protect our hearts to protect our minds, and to protect our productivity. Keeping the Sabbath is one of the 10 commandments, so we could absolutely look at Exodus for this, but we're not going to. I'm going to take us actually to the New Testament because I think that it's easy for us to dismiss the Sabbath as kind of an old school Old Testament tradition rather than recognizing it as the timeless philosophy it actually is. Hebrews chapter 4 goes into depth about this special rest, as they call it, that is reserved only for the people who believe in God. And I encourage you at some point this week, if you have time, to take a look at the whole chapter because it's really interesting. But we're going to focus only on Hebrews chapter 4, verses 9 through 11, again in the NLT, and this is what it says. So there is a special rest, and there's a little footnote in my Bible here that says that is also sometimes translated as a Sabbath rest, a special rest still waiting for the people of God. For all who have entered into God's rest have rested from their labors just as God did after creating the world. So let us do our best to enter that rest. But if we disobey God as the people of Israel did, we will fall. This verse is reminding us that true rest isn't just about taking a day off, right? It's about trusting God with our work, with our business, with everything that we have poured our heart and soul into, and letting Him lead the rhythm of our lives. I mean, it takes faith to set aside a full day in our already overwhelming and overstuffed week just to rest and reflect on God. And like I said at the beginning, my scarcity mindset absolutely won out over this faith, over this trust for a very long time. And I'll be honest, when I first started intentionally making space for the Sabbath and building it into my business, making it a non-negotiable, I was stressed. I was super stressed out. It did not immediately create this, ununderstandable peace for me at all. It took time for it to become a natural part of my rhythm. And honestly, there are still weeks where I struggle with it. But when I prepare and make this a part of my routine, it reminds me that ultimately God is in control and I don't have to do all of this on my own. It's not all on my plate. And honestly, I've also noticed that the weeks where I successfully keep the Sabbath versus letting my stress and my worry win out, I feel so much more at peace and just way less overwhelmed. So in the second quick focus of the month, I will share some practical ways that I was able to start building this into my routine and that I think will be helpful for you as well so that you can start experiencing this renewing rest, this special rest as well. And then finally, let's talk about that third point that I made earlier, which is ensuring provision while we rest. Now, this isn't just about trusting God. Obviously, trusting God is the mindset of it, it's the faith of it, it's the core of it. But it's also about being intentional about the systems and processes that we put in place. And yes, you shouldn't be surprised that this channel is talking about systems and processes because they are such a huge part of what makes everything work for me. And ultimately, I mean, my systems and processes aren't necessarily the ones that will work for you, but you need to find your own so that you can build your version of this kind of rhythm. Being intentional about creating and sustaining these systems and processes, we put them in place so that not only do we take care of our clients and potential clients when we step away, but we're also providing for and taking care of ourselves while we do that. So now we actually are going to go to the Old Testament. We're going to look at a really familiar story actually about when the Israelites were in the desert. They were wandering in the desert. Actually, they had not been there very long yet, and they were starting to worry about food, right? Very practical. How were they going to find food and eat and provide for their families? And, this is one of those times where I think that God shows us so clearly how He shows up for His people. And when you trust Him and when you put faith in Him, how He does provide. So we're going to look at Exodus 16, and this is the story where God first starts providing manna for the Israelites while, like I said, they're wandering in the desert. And what I want us to really pay attention to here, though, what really stuck out to me is that yes, this is a story about how God does provide, but it's also showing us that he gives us clear guidelines. There's a process that they had to follow in order to proactively prepare for that Sabbath. So we're going to look at Exodus 16 verses 4 and 5. But again, if you're not super familiar with this story, I highly recommend that you go back and read the whole chapter. We're going to look first, though, in Exodus 16 verse 4 that says, "Then the Lord said to Moses, 'Look, I'm going to rain down food from heaven for you. Each day the people can go out and pick up as much food as they need for that day. I will test them in this to see whether or not they will follow my instructions.'" Now, God is testing them, right? He says it right there. Are they going to trust him enough to only gather the food that they need for that day for their household? Which, to be fair, back then their households were very large, so it was a lot of food they were gathering, but only what they needed for that day. Because if you don't know the story, what happens if they don't follow those instructions and they gather too much food? The next morning, that leftover food that they had gathered is rotting and filled with maggots, and it's disgusting, right? They can't use it anyway. But by trusting God, that won't happen because they will have eaten everything that they've gathered for that day. And God continues to test us in similar ways. Obviously not quite so obviously, but he does. And when we keep the Sabbath, we are showing him that we trust him. But then when we jump to verses 25 and 26, we better see and understand how we can practically apply this in our own lives. Because what says here is, Moses said, "Eat this food today, for today is a Sabbath day dedicated to the Lord. There will be no food on the ground today. You may gather the food for 6 days, but the seventh day is the Sabbath. There will be no food on the ground that day." Okay, this is repeated twice. When it's repeated like that, you know it's important. So what this is saying is, look, God is telling them in advance, here's what I'm going to do for you. I'm going to provide. I'm going to make sure that there's enough food. But I'm telling you in advance, there's going to be a day every week that I'm not going to provide on that day. But I am going to allow you to be proactive. I'm going to allow you, in fact, I'm going to tell you to gather twice as much on the day before the Sabbath, so that when you wake up on the Sabbath, I promise that food will not have gone bad like it would have if you had not trusted me and gathered too much any other day. This time, I will make sure that your leftover food will still be good and you will be provided for. It's crystal clear, right? It's not quite as clear maybe for us. We don't have it spelled out quite as clearly. But God's instructions about the manna are showing us something incredibly powerful about planning ahead and being proactive to be prepared for rest. There was a system in place that people had to plan ahead and gather twice as much food on the 6th day so that on the 7th day they could rest and be provided for. It's not like they had to fast and go hungry that day. They were provided for so that they could rest fully on the Sabbath. And we can apply that same principle in our own lives, right? We can. What we can't do is just hope that everything is going to work out while we're resting. We need a plan so that both we and our clients and prospective clients are cared for and provided for even when we step away. This might look like setting up automated responses, clearly communicating your schedule with your clients, and structuring your income generating days in a way that you can fully rest on that Sabbath without worry. So God's instructions for the Israelites shows us, it gives us permission to plan ahead. It doesn't mean that planning ahead for that day off is showing a lack of faith. We're not saying that we don't trust God to provide on that 7th day. What we're doing is being a good steward of the business that God has put in our care and being proactive and planning ahead and building that rhythm of rest that he so desires for us and even commands for us. We are preparing for that in advance so that we can consistently keep to that rhythm. And in the final quick focus of the month, I will share some practical things. This is my wheelhouse here, as you know, setting up systems and things like that so that your Sabbath can actually be restful and not be something where you're full of worry the whole time. This week, while you're waiting for that quick focus, go back and revisit some of these passages dig into them a little bit deeper in your quiet time and pray for peace and strength and for God to grow your faith as you plan to implement the Sabbath into your business routine. And while you're doing that, take a quick moment to go and visit the Faith and Focus community prayer space, which will be the first comment on this video. Leave a little prayer request for yourself and pray for somebody else. Let's help each other and encourage each other as we build this routine into our lives and into our business. Thanks for watching this episode all the way to the end, and I hope that you liked it, and more importantly, that you found it helpful. If you did, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with another Christian business owner that you know is going to love it as much as you did. God bless you.